for this year's invitation, and we hope for next year's
to be live, hopefully.
in situ, hopefully, either in Bucharest or in Constanța or wherever, anyway, in Romania, which is always not only a nice country, but only nice people you can, come into contact with there. So anyway, today I'll try to make something simple, but I'm afraid it might not be. The title is Learning Network Connecting Palestine, Rome, and Constantinople in the course of the 7th and 8th century. And I may try to trace the dissemination and transfer of texts, basically, starting, I suspect, from, Palestine, and then culminating as an activity in Rome, funny enough, because you don't expect that event to happen in Rome, and I'm talking about Greek texts, and then via Rome, ending up in Constantinople and other places. This is not, the first aspect of the topic. The major focus of the topic is theological texts, which are more or less neglected, are, the domain of people who deal with esoteric subjects as the ecumenical councils or local councils and the transmission of dogmas. And in some cases, good philologists would possibly investigate the textual transmission of a number of these texts via particular families of manuscripts that are, located or, can possibly be appointed to particular places. But what happens here is, I suspect, is a phenomenon that might be indicative of other motions of texts. Okay, what I trace here in today's lecture is the dissemination, or as I said, the transfer of texts from three or through or among, whatever you like, three major places, that is Palestine, then via Africa, Carthage, basically Rome, and then to Constantinople, in the context usually of two major ecumenical councils. Okay, now this is what you have in terms of what is evident. Okay, but let me open a brief paragraph, a brief parenthesis. You remember that the major event that more or less triggered what you call the Renaissance was the Council of Ferrara-Florence, many years later. Okay, I'm talking about 1439, 1440. And we know that in this time we had all the texts, and the Greek representatives had the broad manuscripts with them from Constantinople, and the Latin delegates of the Pope had their own manuscripts from the Vatican Library, or from the libraries all over the Italian peninsula, if I remember rightly, but basically Vatican Library, from the Library of the Vatican. By that time, I don't think it was already established. There were some early. The Vatican Library was in its earlier stages. Well, we can see them, the texts used in the acts of the Ferrara-Florence Council. Okay, but we know very well that what happened in these texts, in the context of this council, was an exchange of many other texts, especially Plato. If you remember the participants like, Bessarion, for example, or George Emistos Plethon, and other people. Okay, together with their theological manuscripts, some of which are preserved, for example, in the Biblioteca Marciana in Venice, and they had also a number of manuscripts of classical authors, and in fact, most of them ended via the bequest of Cardinal Bessarion in the Biblioteca Marciana of Venice. Okay, This is something we know, and we still, reap its fruits today in, in the holdings of these libraries, especially the Marciana. The thing is that I have the feeling that similar things did happen, but they can only be deduced by what we see in the acts, in what the acts are of councils. Now, there is not a single reference to any other secular work in the course of the act, say, of the Council of Lateran. You have the text, okay, of the Annual School of Byzantine Studies, okay.
Yes.
If you see the events, okay. What we have, major events, apart from dates. In the year 649, we have the Lateran Synod. I'll get into details when it comes to the appropriate part of my communication today. But the thing is that in the Lateran Council, for example, there is a small section which shows that the author of the text was fully aware of grammatical treatises and of the logic of Aristotle. So people like, major authors of the ancient times, like Aristotle, perhaps Plato, perhaps, are in the background of what I will investigate. But unfortunately, as I said, we have no direct evidence of what happens in the transmission of this secular knowledge. What is clearly evident, and this is what I will be investigating, I will be talking about today, is indeed the learning networks starting from Palestine and ending up in Constantinople via Rome, unfortunately related only to theological texts, because this is what we have, clearly recorded in well-documented texts and activities such as the councils of the church. Okay, but let me just give you a brief outline. The crucial period I will be dealing with spreads between the years of the later years of the reign of Heraclius, okay, 610, 641, and I see, as you see, I have a list of emperors, underscoring the among, are rather in bolds, the major names under which we had some serious developments. Okay, and Heraclius is the first, and the period closes with Constantine VI, okay, who ruled between 780 and 797. And the thing is that the defining, starting moment for me, for our investigation, is the expansion of Islam, okay, which by the year, as you see, 635, 638, had conquered Damascus, Emesa, Jerusalem. It seems that the Patriarch Sophronius had, handed over Jerusalem to the Muslims in the year 638 or 637. We're not certain, but this is the earliest limit, and conclude with the Seventh Ecumenical Council of the year 797. Now, what are the major issues people had to discuss in theological terms by that time? And I give you some elementary definitions here. Okay, the major development, started earlier, unfortunately, in the 5th century, and even in the 6th, major theological disputes were not easily resolved. The Fourth Ecumenical Council left, left some issues concerning the two natures of Christ. Then in the Fifth Ecumenical Council in the year 553, Justinian tried to resolve some particular issues, as sort of have spilled over the limits of the issues dealt with by the the Fourth Ecumenical Council, but still resistance and dissent continued, and especially in the eastern provinces, especially Alexandria and Palestine. So Heraclius, facing also the threat of the Persian expansion, you remember 613, I think they conquered Jerusalem and took the Holy Cross to their capital, and forced Heraclius to start his campaign against the Persians, which eventually ended, successfully, but unfortunately exhausted the two empires and left the space open for Islam to appear and expand. Okay, what Heraclius did in order to, apart from his military actions, he tried also to reconcile the differences between the Diothelites, the Orthodox part, and the Diothecites, okay, the Orthodox, and the Monothelites of Alexandria, especially, and Palestine. And he came with some compromise solutions through the help of his, religious leaders, I would say, like Sergius and Pyrrhus and a few other religious people, which suggested that, okay, Christ had two natures, but unfortunately, or for dogmatic purposes, he existed, he had one energy, and his will had to be considered as one, as the human and his divine volition were not in conflict. And that caused a serious problem. And this is how things, stood when Islam appeared. And the places where these dogmas had a firm grasp among the population were, lost, unfortunately, to the imperial Byzantine. So, especially the Orthodox people, after 638, had as their only recourse the option of fleeing first to the west of Africa, that is Carthage, and then through Carthage, Sicily, and southern Italy to Rome. And the major personality which fled among them was a certain theologian, extremely well known, called Maximus the Confessor, okay, who spent some time in Carthage, debated the monothelite issue with people in there, exchanged a number of letters with people all around the Byzantine or former Byzantine Empire, especially with Cyprus, and then ended up in Rome. It seems that these people had taken with them the only valuable things according to their, evaluation of things material, that is manuscripts, okay? And what we see in their documents and the works that were written in their time of sojourn, say, first of all in Carthage and then especially in Rome, is a wealth of knowledge, theological knowledge that is based on material already extant in works of major earlier fathers. Okay. And what we have there is the creation of new theological works, especially by the hand of Maximus the Confessor, but also by one or two, question mark here, individuals called Anastasi, who followed him in his stay in Rome. And together with him, a number of Greek-speaking monks, especially from Palestine and other places like Egypt, and I suspect also, yes, we have evidence for that, Cyprus as well, settled in Rome and formed a, I would say, a thriving Greek-speaking community of religious people, especially monks, but also ecclesiastics in general, priests, I would say. And a little later, I mean, we're at 638, but then the sojourn also of who was Constantine Pogonatus V, Constantine V, no, not the fifth, sorry, Constantine IV. After 668, a few decades later, you remember that he also, among other things, thought of transferring the capital of the Byzantine Empire to Sicily. And as a side effect of this motion, which was a failed one, okay, Sicily, he was murdered actually in 685 in the bath in Sicily. The project failed, and Constantinople remained Constantinople. But the interesting thing is that he initiated a line of succession of popes of Greek origin, especially Palestinian, in Rome, which ended up with Pope Zachary sometimes in the 750s. Okay. So that was an interesting aspect of these motions, initiated or forced by the presence of Islam in the East. Now, what happens in Rome once they are forced to move these monks around Maximus the Confessor? They are forced to move away from Carthage and Northern Africa to Rome, and the major objective of their life by that time was the fight of monothelities and monoenergies. Okay. So in early 640, sometimes around 645, 46, I don't remember exact dates, but we are in there. They settled in Rome, and they more or less started, intensive activity, theoretical and especially theological, in terms of written, small documents, treatises, pamphlets, refuting the major points of monothelities and monoenergies. And since by that time the Pope happened to be Greek, Theodore I, Maximus came into contact with him with the objective of convoking a council. Okay, so I have given you this little file the definition of the council, ecumenical council, but apart from the seven ecumenical councils, which are officially recognized by both the Greek, the Orthodox and the Catholic, and I think the Anglican Church as well, there are also other local synods which function in the same sort of manner, or in partially the same. As I give you the term in ecumenical council, is a meeting of bishops, monks, not always monks, but especially in the Seventh Ecumenical Council, which we will visit tonight, is their presence is enhanced there, and other leaders convoked by the Byzantine emperor. That was two major, prerogatives or prerequisites for the validity of the council. And its purpose is to discuss and rule on questions of Christian doctrine primarily, administration and discipline. Discipline expressed in the action of issuing ecclesiastical canons, okay, and other matters. They are called ecumenical simply because these seven, at least, can possibly boast of having participation from all over the lands of the Christian world. even from the West, from Rome, or, I guess, yes, even Theodore of Tarsus, the first Archbishop of Canterbury in England, was somehow related to one of these councils. Okay, so we are in the year 640 something, 646, 7, and Maximus the Confessor draws up the plan of putting together an ecumenical council. Okay, but since it cannot be convoked officially by the emperor, who was a monothelite by that time, okay, unfortunately, we are in the reign of Constans II, 641, 668. Okay. The claim of ecumenicity is limited, I would say, although the people who put it together termed it an ecumenical one. It cannot be. And originally, this council was supposedly the recording of the transactions of the bishops who came together in order to pass a judgment against monothelitism and monorenergism. Okay. Pope Theodore died before that council was officially convoked, and he was succeeded by Pope Martin I. And the first thing that Martin tried to do was, was to convoke this scheduled council in the year 649. So bishops from the Western world, with the participation of Maximus, although his name appears as in the under the authorship of two canons of this, two rules that are issued by this council anyway, and Anastasi were present, and a number of supposedly Greek participants, but the names are mainly the names of Western bishops. A very strange thing with this council is that originally people were thinking that, okay, this is, the recording of the transactions of the Latin participants to this event. And then we have the Greek text, which is the Greek translation. Okay. But the ingenious work of the editor of this act in the frame of the Acta Conciliorum Ecumenicorum, that illustrious series, proved that the original text was the Greek one. And in fact, it was simply a philological, a literary text, which utilized in its expression, as I said, the treatises of grammar, Aristotle, not evident. Okay, but not evident, yes, but not explicitly mentioned. Okay. And it was put together as a dialogue of participants, people like Catholic bishops who knew only Latin and didn't know anything and couldn't even understand the complexity of the theological matters discussed in there. But still, that was the Greek text, which translated into Latin, in fact, by the people in the papal curia, was signed after it was read out loud in the presence, supposedly, this is a suggestion of Riediger, if I remember rightly, in front of the assembly of these bishops. They signed, they didn't know what they signed for, but anyway, this is a council and there is no contest of the validity of this text. Okay. It is a literary text, but it is also a great monument witnessing to the presence of a number of major theological texts. Okay, because, and here I open another parenthesis. Okay, when you have in the frame of a council, when you need to discuss a theological issue, you have to validate your argument on the basis of the existing tradition. Can anybody tell us what does that mean? How does that translate? We say that the Godhead is a Trinity. Okay, who proves that? Okay, if we say that, I'm gonna say that I gave an elementary example. Okay, proof comes from established texts of authority. Okay, so whenever you have to defend, say the thesis that Christ has two wills, you have to have a set of texts that support these pronouncements. You understand? Is that clear? So the set of texts is clearly, evident. First of all, the Holy Bible, especially the New Testament. But then you have the testimony of the apostles, the Acts, for example, whatever they said, the letters of, okay, this is part of the Bible anyway. Next come the Holy Fathers, the major teachers of Orthodoxy, not Orthodoxy, sorry, of the Christian faith in general, by the time the church was one. Okay, so what you have to do in the frame of these discussions is to say that, yes, okay, we are going to say this, we are going to pronounce that Christ is, in two wills, exists in two wills and in two energies, but we have also to support written affirmation of that. And that comes in the writings of, say, the major fathers. Gregory of Nyssa, Gregory of Nazianzus, Basil the Great, Cyril of Alexandria especially, who was a major figure in the Fourth Ecumenical Council. Okay. So you have to support that. Now, in terms of convenience, you certainly have the books. Okay, it is a matter, of authority as well. Books that are, the genuine and unadulterated work of the early fathers. Okay, when Cyril says something, it's got to be, the way he said it, the way he wrote it himself, not falsified. Okay, that's a major issue. And you have to support it. I mean, you have to use it by presenting the book first and reading the particular section. Now, think of that. Adversus Ennomium, for example, one of the major works used throughout the councils. Adversus Ennomium, there are lots, by Cyril, by Gregory of Nyssa, if I remember, by Gregory of Nazianzus, if I'm not mistaken. And most of all these authors wrote hundreds of pages on the topic, which had to do with the Holy Spirit and the natures of Christ, if I remember rightly. Now, the question is, using an entire book is thoroughly unpractical. So what did they do? They started, once the whole theological debate began, both sides, both the Orthodox and the heretical one, compiled anthologies, or the so-called Florilegia, from extracts, the crucial extracts from the major works. So instead of reading the entire work in the course of a particular council, say the Adversus Ennomium, which might have needed something like 20 hours to read the entire thing, they simply read the small paragraph, which is a 1 or 2 minute reading time to prove the basic, to support the basic documents. That, for example, Christ has two wills. Okay. And these anthologies were the basic instrument of documentation and support of major theological, dogmatical pronouncements and resolutions. And their presence throughout the history of the councils testifies to the presence of actual books. And when you have a florilegium, an anthology, consisting of something like, 10 or 20 folios of a manuscript, you have to be certain, not to have to be certain, you are certain, we are certain, that behind that, there are thousands of pages of manuscripts of the entire, anthologized works. Right. So what happens in the Lateran Council, in the Council of the Lateran? In 649, we had supposedly, this literary text, okay? But the thing is that in the course of these actions, of the acts of the, acts are the sessions, okay? 5 sections, for example, okay? They presented something like, a small florilegia of 11 quotations and what's that, the second session, the second act, and so on. But the whole thing is that quotations from monothelite as well, authors were presented and refuted by the juxtaposition of a number of other orthodox quotations or excerpts, 3-liners, 5-liners of Orthodox fathers. The thing is that at a certain point, at the conclusion, in order to give the final blow to the monothelite cause, the Pope Martin supposedly, okay, who didn't know Greek, but still, as I said, the literary text of the Acts says that, and I'll read the Greek text, and if you don't understand that, I will possibly translate it. I will translate it right after that. Pope Martin said the following things, introducing a massive florilegia. Okay. «Δι' υπομονής τρέχομεν των προκείμενων ημίν αγώνα αφορώντες εις αυτών των της πίστεως και αρχηγών και τελειωτήν Ιησούν, ως επί της προκειμένης ημίν δι' αυτών υποθέσεως, το πνεύμα της αυτού κατά φύσιν αλήθειας χαρίσεται, λαρούν εν ημίν και φθεγόμενον τα μεγαλεία της πίστεως, δια της διδασκαλίας των Πατέρων, ους εγγράφος ήδη εναντίας εσυκοφάντησαν, οι πόντες εκείνα διδάσκην αυτούς, αυτοί δια της καινοτομίας δίδαξαν. Ου χάριν, and this is the most significant here, τας ιεράς αυτών βίβλους ενεχθήνε προστάσσον. Μάλλον δε, τας αναλεγήσας ημίν εξ αυτών ευσεβείς περί Χριστού του Θεού μαρτυρίας. This is exactly what I told you. Okay, this is recorded here in exact detail as I put it to you. Let me translate. We run this contest in patience, looking up to the leader of our faith and perfecter of it, Jesus Christ, which in this particular case will give us or grant us the spirit of his natural truth, speaking in us the wonders of the faith through the teaching of the Holy Fathers, which the opponents, our opponents, the monothelites, esikophantison, slandered in writing, in other books, okay, saying that they teach, that is the monothelites, the things that the fathers themselves have taught, and that they did in a way of a novelty, kenotomia, which is an anathema word for the Byzantines. For the sake of this, for the clarification of the speaking of the greatness of faith, okay, I order for the books to be brought forward, or rather, the selected citations from them which deal with Christ, God, in a pious manner. So you see, he speaks about books here and citations at the same time. And this massive florilegium, in fact, consists of 123 quotations extracted from 58 works of 26 authors. So that means, think of, 58 manuscripts. Or if it's not 58, might be, I don't know, 10 at least, containing multiple works. But still, the presence of the books, the dissemination of this kind of knowledge, from supposedly, I guess, not supposedly, from Palestine, I suspect. And for that, unfortunately, we have only one witness. I'll speak about that later on. They came from Palestine. They were carried as manuscripts from Palestine to Carthage and then to Rome, and were deposited in the Lateran Palace by the time, where the councils were took place. These 123 works, citations come from works of preeminent fathers. I guess there's no need to repeat their names, but the expected ones. I mean, Gregory, the two Gregors, John Chrysostom, theologian, Cyril of Alexandria, and some other as well, some other fathers. Let's see if I have some of them handy, apart from these two. But I guess they're also, they added, the Latins, supposedly, in order to show the participation, added the names and citation from works of Latin fathers. Okay, that's nice. And, what we see in this period, which supposedly is the early stages of what we call the, the Dark Ages. Okay, mid 7th century to mid 8th century. Still, in this time, we have this kind of literary product based on knowledge that was transferred, I suspect, as I said, from Palestine originally, through a circle of people. Maximus the Confessor, preeminent among them, to Rome. And that is a major monument to what, we have as a witness to what people were interacting with in terms of written texts. Okay, but the whole thing doesn't stop there. Okay, the Lateran Council was an unfortunate event for the people who, put it together and convoked it. Pope Martin, if you remember, was accused by the emperor and was abducted to Constantinople. And Maximus the Professor was also arrested, taken to Constantinople, and then they were sent to exile in Kherson. Maximus died 4 years later in 653. Martin, I think, died earlier. Martin also was accused not of staging this council, but of, assuming the patriarchal, the papal throne without the consent of the emperor. Okay, so you see, that was an unfortunate event, but see what people do based on the knowledge contained in these books and texts. The issue of the monothelitism was not resolved, and the Lateran Council was not considered an ecumenical one, but political, things changed, and Constantine IV, okay, soon after 649, 641, 668, Constans was a long-living emperor, ruled for something like 27 years. But in the year 668, Constantine IV succeeded him, and later on, he decided to give a final resolution with question marks to the issue of the monothelite, monoenergite question. And he convoked the Fifth Ecumenical Council. Okay, in my list I gave you the Sixth Ecumenical, in the year 680, 681. it condemned monothelitism. And one energies and the Orthodox dogma was upheld for for good. Now, supposedly this was not. If one reads the recorded acts of this council, one might discover who took place in Constantinople. Discover that this was not a council devoted to discussions about dogma. It was devoted, its 14 sessions, most of its 14 or 15 sessions, which lasted for 1 year, were spread all over, between September and November of 680 and September of 681. The acts were devoted to the examination of manuscripts and citations. And in fact, the original letter which the Emperor Constantine Pogonatos, as is well known, sent to the Pope was asking for representatives of the Pope, up to 12, who were meant to take part to the Ecumenical Council, together with delegates from the other patriarchates and Constantinople. And the letter concluded also with the request of provision of books. Imagine that, Constantinople asking for books, theological books, asking Rome for theological books. Okay. The thing is that, as it turns out, the delegates of the Pope fulfilled the request of the Emperor and arrived at Constantinople with a number of books, as it seems. And among other things, they had also a collection of patristic citations. So they had the books and they had the Florilegia as well. And they, the procedure was really complicated to expand it here. But the thing is that they sealed the books in order to, and the codices, as they are called, or codicili, in order to be impossible for anyone to alter them, okay, to play with them, to adulterate them, if you like. And in one of the particular sessions, they were officially unsealed and compared to the citations of the heretical part, of the Nothelite part, led by Macarius, Bishop of Antioch, who was the arch heretic by that time. The examination of manuscripts also, brought by Macarius from another place. He was working either in Antioch or in Constantinople at the time, and also in other places, but these are the two major places we know associated with him, was proven to have falsified or tampered with the manuscripts and had either removed crucial passages, especially of the manuscripts containing the acts of the Fifth Ecumenical Council. There might be a reason why, in the activity of that Macarius, why I do not possess the entirety of the acts of the Fifth Ecumenical Council, 553 under Justinian, these days. We have only Latin translations and small parts of the Greek original. And they also found that a number of citations which supposedly supported the monothelite, monoenergetic positions, were either falsified or abridged or expanded when they were collated, compared with the contents of the original Florilegia, original authologies brought from Rome. So as you see, the major works of fathers have in these early and dark period, okay, Middle Ages, have traveled along the major centers of the Byzantine world, Palestine, Carthage, Rome, and Constantinople, and ended up in the official acts of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. Some of them ended up also in the library of the Patriarchate by that time, and it seems that they were also part of the holdings of the Library of the Rome. So the dissemination of these works, once placed in these major centers and safe as well, is more or less, guaranteed. Okay. Now, what happens? Goodness me, time flies. So I'll try to be brief. What we had in the Sixth Ecumenical Council, is a nice sort of consolidation of the idea that, books, texts, and major theological works, and potentially major works of Aristotle, at least, and grammarians for sure, traveled through these major routes from Palestine, Arab-occupied Palestine, to Rome, to Constantinople. Okay. The interesting thing is that we have a similar situation in the 8th century. Again, okay. And as you know, iconoclasm broke out in the year 730, 726, the date is not clearly established in my mind, at least. But again, the same procedure took place. Okay, what was that procedure? We have the problem of permissibility of constructing and venerating images or handmade items. Okay. How do you resolve this problem? The solution with taking recourse to patristic authority is simple. Let's find works of early fathers in which icons are present. And what the people did again, first of all, John of Damascus, this time again in Palestine, in the monastery of St. Saba, in its excellent library, put together three sermons, put together three sermons in defense of the holy images, and at the end of these sermons, he appended a number of citations, a number of extracts from earlier fathers. Not only, the major ones, like, Cyril of Alexandria or Basil the Great or, the two Gregories, but also from other lesser ones, like Severian of Gabala, like Leontios of Neapolis, a person who perhaps was part of the Greek retinue of Maximus, perhaps. Okay, Leontios of Neapolis, and that these were simple, documents. They also used the Pratum Spirituale. Just to put together the whole image. It is also said that in the times of the early appearance of monothelitism, one of the other major proponents of the Orthodox positions, the Sophronius, the great patriarch, supposedly put together another anthology of 1,000 extracts in Palestine. This is not preserved. But the thing is that 1,000 citations means that he had a vast library. And it seems that part of that was taken together with other documents in Rome by Maximus the Confessor. Okay. Now, the thing is that in the 8th century, we have a similar situation. John of Damascus in Palestine, again, puts together this really nice collection of citations based, as I said, on major ecclesiastical authors, but also on minor ones, as Stephen of Worcester, for example, who knows that name, is well known for only one work, or Severian of Gabala, an opponent of John Chrysostom. Okay, and some others. That's fine. It seems that also that this collection found its way early to Rome. Okay, and as it seems, the popes in Rome, who was that? Pope Stephen, the second and third, put together another local council against iconoclasm. We don't have much preserved of this, of the acts of these two councils. But the thing is that we have a few citations which are preserved later, in a much later document in Latin. So, Greek fragments of fathers translated into Latin by Pope Hadrian, who's a much later pope, in a letter he sent to Charles the Great in 793. So you see, in iconoclasm, the things follow the same route, but also spread out like rays to the rest of Europe, especially through Charles the Great. I'll finish with that. The thing is that, again, there comes the time when, the iconoclast emperor, Constantine V, Compronymus dies. His successor is, warm, and not warm to the idea of restoring the icons, but his son, Constantine VI, and his mother, Irene, decide to restore the images. But the thing is that in order to restore them, and because of the fact there was a local council, the Council of Ieria in 754, that had condemned the veneration of images, one had to convoke another council. And they decide to convoke an ecumenical council. Again, the same procedure. A letter to the Pope, please send us delegates. Letter to the patriarchs of the East, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria, send us delegates in order to debate the issue of icon veneration. Okay. And please also, again to the Pope, send us books. The interesting thing here is that there is a manuscript on which I wrote an entire book, which was written, its original was written in Rome, was put together in Rome. And this manuscript contains all the, and more in fact, citations. This is my position, despite the fact that, Eric Lamberts, who has edited the Acts of the Seventh Ecumenical Council, cites that book hundreds of times. Still, he disagrees with me. He thinks that the book has copied the Acts of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. My idea is that, the book, the manuscript, Codex Parisinus Grecus 1115, put together in Rome in the year 775, it's explicitly stated in its colophon, contained the entirety of the iconophile citations. And they were simple citations. I mean, nothing, theologically complicated. I mean, you have, three fragments from the Patrum Spirituale of Sophronius. Okay, the Patrum Spirituale, what is the first chapter? That, a priest, a monk is tormented by the demon of fornication and says, please leave me alone because I'm an old man, I cannot stand your presence. And the demon appears to him and tells him, okay, I will let you free from my temptation, but you have to stop venerating the image of the Virgin Mary you have in your cell. That's all. A simple reference to the presence of an image. This is all. That was the, the documentation the iconophile party had presented in the course of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. And all these witnesses were put together in the year 774, 775, according to my theory at least, in Rome. And they were brought together with a florilegia of John of Damascus and the letters of John of Damascus, because it seems that, some fragments of John of Damascus are included in this manuscript. They were brought again together in Constantinople. And they were used for the acts of the Seventh Ecumenical Council. And not only that, the acts of the Seventh Ecumenical Council, translated into Latin, were sent to the Carolingians, to Aachen, to Charles the Great, Carlo Magno. And Alcuin put together the Libri Carolini, which is a refutation, and there is a discussion. And you see that this kind of knowledge that spread, the theological knowledge spread from Palestine to Rome and then to Constantinople, where it was also disseminated to the rest of Western Europe by that time. And eventually, it brought forth a number of results, like the Protestant iconoclasm, for example, centuries later. But as you see, the Byzantine Empire, by the time, even when part of it was under now the Arab rule, was an open route to the dissemination of theological knowledge. And given the fact that I myself think that, given the fact, I suggest that in accordance with that, what I described in the frame of, the transactions of the Ferrara-Florence Council, I suspect that these theological texts did not circulate alone from Palestine to Rome to Constantinople, or from Rome to Constantinople, but they were also escorted, in inverted commas, by a number of other major secular texts, especially theological and grammatical, theological, I said, philosophical texts, and manuals of grammar, perhaps other things as well, perhaps other sorts of texts. And this is how, knowledge, theological knowledge, but all sorts of knowledge is flourishing, even in the darkest times of the high Middle Ages, the dark Middle Ages, which is supposedly the mid-8th century. So this is all for today.